You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caparelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators. This is another great episode coming at you. I'm really happy about today's question because it's another one that I'm coming off the page a little bit. In the last couple of weeks, I've been asking questions on this show that are not quite hypothetical, but that are questions I get a lot of, not something that's been formally written into the show. I do have a pile of those still left, but I kind of like also taking a little pause and just answering questions that I kind of get commonly. And that's what I thought I'd continue on that track of doing here today. So this question comes from, there's a little history behind this, so bear with me. But this question comes from some of the radio interviews that I've done. So when I released my book back in 2015, and I've talked about that a lot on the show, I don't want to get too pitchy about it, but I released the book back in 2015. And when I did that, I hired a publicist and went on a whole bunch of different radio shows and radio programs and things like that to kind of promote the book. And most of them were, 10, 15 minute interviews. And I was pretty nervous on the first one, but after you do 20 or 30 of these things, you start to get into a pattern and into a routine. But one of the questions that I always dreaded was when people would say, hey, give me an example of a company you worked with, or a really great strategy that you developed, or a really bad strategy that you developed, and kind of let me know what that looks like. And so I got that question a few times from a few different hosts, and I always kind of swallowed my my tongue on it because I never wanted to answer. A couple of reasons. Number one is that I never like to reveal the names of companies that I've worked with. I don't know. I'm probably overly cautious, maybe overly paranoid, but when I work with a company, I do so under, a confidentiality agreement almost always. And, they don't want me revealing intimate details of the strategies I'm working on, whether or not I hide the name of the company. I feel like that's irrelevant. I don't feel like I should be talking about their strategy. Strategy is a very sensitive thing, especially if it hasn't been executed yet. So that's not something that I feel comfortable doing. But there's another part of this that makes me uncomfortable. And the reason that I wanted to answer this question today or ask this question today is because I actually did another radio interview here in the last couple of weeks. And this was a more comprehensive one. It's a longer one. I'll post a link to it when it comes out. I don't even know that it's actually aired yet, although it's been recorded. And the same question came up. This was, like I say, a longer interview. So of course there was more that we wanted to go into. And that question came up again, give me an example of a really great strategy that you helped to execute, or a really bad one. And once again, I kind of, retracted into myself, said, man, I hate this question. And it forced me to really analyze why I hate this question so much. So let me go ahead and ask the question officially, and then I can give you my answer now that I've had a little more time to contemplate what I would have said had I had more time to think about it. So here's the question. Dear Strategy, can you give me an example of a really great or a really bad strategy? So kind of simplified it, but that's the gist of it. And here's the reason that I can't, okay? I think what people are looking for when they ask a question like that is they want to know that you're credible, right? They want to know that you've worked with a company that it was the next big thing, right? They want to hear the next Apple story or the next IKEA story or the next Tesla story. And they want to know that your process, resulted in that. And the truth is that that's not what usually happens, right? When you get those outliers, and they truly are outliers, there's usually not a process. There's usually not a textbook that's been followed. There's usually not a framework that's been followed. Those types of examples really form the examples, right? Those are the examples that the frameworks are written from. And usually those strategies are a result of pure creativity, pure intuition, people just looking around them, observing the world around them, and using that intuition to come up with something that no one has ever thought of before. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not, right? So you cover the really great and the really bad. And then what happens is in order to try and emulate that, consultants and academics and all those, they try and look at what has been done intuitively and put a framework around it so that everyone else can kind of utilize a similar process to try and come up with their next great big thing. But the fact of the matter is, most people don't get there, right? Most people can take pieces of what others have done and apply it into their own work to make their strategies and make their process incrementally better. And that's the vast majority, 99.9% of what I do, right? Is I look at what other people have done well. I don't ask people to imitate that because I think that's a bad practice. But you take pieces of what those companies may or may not have been doing, and you try and teach that to other people so that they can be inspired by those strategies or inspired by those processes and implement a little bit more of that. And what you end up getting is a company, let's say, that had no product strategies, and now they're thinking strategically at the product line level, which is a huge turnaround for them. It's a huge game changer for them as a company, but it's not something that's going to result in the next Apple, right? What it's going to do is it's going to give them incrementally more margin, incrementally more sales, incrementally more focus. Those aren't exciting or sexy stories, but they're really important for the companies that I work with. And if I do that with, 20 different product managers, and each one of them increases their sales a little, increases their margin a little, and has a little bit more focus, when you put that all together, it's a big game changer for the company, but without the big story of, somebody starting in their garage and coming up with the next big idea and then making it into a multi-billion-dollar company, because that's not what most strategies look like, right? Most strategies are taking pieces of that and applying it on a smaller level so that collectively it can become a bigger thing. And so it's really hard to say, hey, give me an example of the next big company that you worked with, because even the largest consultants in the world would have trouble giving you those examples. It's just not generally the way it works. Now, what I do want to do, though, is provide you with a little bit of guidance if I was going to answer the question generically. And here's the way that I would answer it, is that on a generic basis, the best strategies that I see, the ones that result in more sales, more revenue, more margin, more growth, are the ones that are focused on the customers, okay? The ones that result in the least growth, the least, benefit to the company are the ones that are focused on the company. What do I mean by that? Well, I've talked about this a lot on this blog before. I've written about it. It's in my book, all these other things, but I always look at the difference between, visions and strategies and so forth. I look at inspirational versus motivational, right? And when something is inspirational, I say that it's inspired by the outside world. People are inspired to change the world. They're inspired to help other people, right? They're inspired to do something that no one's ever done before for the purpose of the better good of society or the world, right? When you do something motivational, you're doing it for you. I'm motivated to lose weight. I'm motivated to get another degree. I'm motivated to be smarter, right? Whatever it is. Those things are about you. And they're valid. I'm not saying that they're bad, right? But when you translate that to a company and you say a company wants to grow for the company's sake alone, the company wants to increase share for their sake alone, they want to increase shareholder value because they want to put more money in their pocket. Those are important things that companies need to do. But when your strategy is 100% motivated and not inspired, those tend to, in my experience, result in the what I would say, the not so good strategies. Why is that? Well, because the people that are ultimately buying your products and services are outside of your company. And if you're only thinking about you and you're not thinking about them, then you're never going to get the revenue and value from them that you're looking for, right? When, on the other hand, you're inspired and you develop an inspired strategy for someone outside of your company, they're going to reward you with money and share and margin and all those things that you want. Now, the truth is that most companies will have some combination of those two, some healthy combination of motivation and inspiration. But you really have to pay attention to the fact that if you are putting a strategy in place that's really just about you and you alone, those usually end up being the worst strategies. And unfortunately, I would say that that's the most common strategy that I see as well. A lot of companies, that's where they start, right? We need to grow. We need to increase shareholder value. We need to do this. We need to do that. We want to be number one. Well, the only way that you're going to do that is if you are inspired to help other people and you're inspired to change the world or make the world different. And the best strategies that you've seen, that's where they start, right? They don't start by someone who wants to be a billionaire. They start with someone who wants to change the world. And that is a whole different way to go. So if I was going to bring this back around, I would say, can I give you examples of really great strategies and really bad strategies? Of course I can. But because of client confidentiality, I'm not going to. And I would tell you that even if I do, you're not going to be interested in, a product you never heard of and how that grew, by 5%. Because the way that this really works is that you help people on an incremental basis, and collectively that makes a big difference for a company. But if I was going to put this into a generic term, if you're helping the outside world, those strategies usually end up being more successful. If you're only in it for yourself, not so much. So I hope that's a helpful answer. In some ways, that's redeeming myself for all of the poor answers I've given in any radio interview that I've ever done. So I hope that this one was a little bit better. But of course, if you want to visit us, you want to ask a question of the show, please go visit our website at dearstrategy.net or dearstrategy.com. They both go to the same place. You can click on the contact us link or ask a question link, I think it's called, and go ahead and ask a question for the show, give us feedback or anything else that you want to share. Also, please don't forget to visit my company and the company that sponsors this show, Strategy Generation Company. If you're interested in training, if you're interested in anything having to do with, helping you build your own strategy, go out to strategygeneration.com and you can take advantage of our workshops and our tools and our resources and all the other things that we have to offer there. We also have another Facebook group, or a Facebook group that I've just created. I promised you some episodes ago that I would do that. So I have created a Facebook group called We Are Strategy Creators. So go out and check that out and join up, and you will be welcome as a listener to the show to be a part of that group. And really what I'm trying to do there is get a Facebook group where people will share their own strategic stories, ask strategic questions, and build a community where people can help one another. So I hope you'll join us there as well. In the meantime, as you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan, and we'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.